Thank you, Brian, for those kind words, and appreciate that, and appreciate being invited back to Rutgers. I have been consider myself a friend for many years now. My first trip there was in, I said, oh 08, oh 09, somewhere in there. I've been back many times since, and always feel a part of what you guys are doing and what you guys are going through. And I've known Brian and Becky and others here for a long time, and it's great to be back. So let me play this guy from the start here. I'm going to be cognizant of your time and hopefully wrap up just around 8 o'clock, and then take questions after that. There are 144 slides, and and after tonight, I don't see any reason, unless I see something else I don't has to change. I will send you this document tonight, so you guys, and it's yours. It's your document. And there are some things that came up in the afternoon session that are pretty relevant, and the fact that your bargaining is critically important, and getting involved in what Heather and Brian was saying could not be more important in a time like this. So overall, and the way Brian framed it is correct. Rutgers is in solid. I didn't say great. I just said solid financial condition, and supported by reserves and cash flows and increasing state support. Uh, the best evidence we have is the bond rating, which is AA3, which is the fourth highest bond rating. Not great, but certainly good, very good, I'd put it. And a quote from that bond rating. And your CFO is recently quoted as saying in his technical assessment of the year, he basically gives a state of the university financially that he puts out there. And, these are kind of things that, a lot of people don't see, but when I prepare these, I just look for everything that's been put out by the administration. As innocuous as some of it may seem, it's where you really learn. It's where I get a sense of what they're thinking and where things are going, because I don't live there like you do. But he was very positive about the results in the year 2025. In their story, we have good enrollment. Athletics is a huge problem, as we'll talk about, and admin is always a problem. But their story is at the bottom of this page is things may be okay. It's the future that's the problem. They're going to use phrases like Brian said, like structural deficit. They're going to talk about federal grants, financial aid being in trouble. There's a demographic cliff. We don't have enough international students. We don't have enough out-of-state students. We have inflation. We have all these unions we have to bargain with who ask for too much money, and that's why we're in trouble, and that's why we can't give you what we want. The key takeaway that I want you guys to get from this presentation is I'm going to attack each of their claims that they've made at various times in various documents over the last, shall we say, several months, and with empirical evidence, and how their claims are really not supported by the empirical evidence. And that's really the theme of what we're doing. That's what I want you to take out of this more than anything. Obviously, there's a lot of data in here, and I'm going to focus in the presentation on mostly the graphs and not so much the numbers, though we'll look at some of those as well. And of course, you'll have this document to do what you like with it. So first, we're just going to start overall how they doing. And there's the AA3 bond rating, which is the fourth highest out of all the bond ratings possible. And as we'll show you, the ratios definitely support this rating as being good and solid overall, not quite AAA like some of your competitors are. In the Big Ten, Purdue, Indiana, Michigan all have AAA bond ratings, for example. But still, AA3 is still very solid, and certainly not any indication of financial trouble or anything close to it. Sorry. I don't know what we're doing. There we go. So this is from the bond rating itself. What are the strengths? Large scope of operations, a lot of cash. The state is actually doing well, despite what people may think. And the state appropriation got mentioned. And one of the things we're going to talk about, I think that Heather mentioned, was the reduction in the state appropriation that got reversed last year. And I'm going to show you that later when we get to the budget. We're going to look at that. And certainly they're talking about that same thing again. So, I know it's not part of what I'm doing here, but I'm just going to say being involved in the activism is really important. And the other thing is the university is also, the Board of Trustees is signing off on the budget in the next several weeks, and they're signing off on the tuition increase that they're about to impose for the next academic year. So all these things are happening now. So I'm glad you guys are all here on a Tuesday night, and getting involved and is really important because it's a pretty critical time considering not just negotiations, but everything else that's going on. And your voice really can matter. They did talk about in the bond report effective management. What happens is that the CFO and the president, it's usually just the two of them, maybe another staff member, go to the city. As a Long Island guy, I could say going to the city if that's okay with you guys. I am. I did grow up in Merrick, and a Knicks fan. They go to the city and they meet with Moody's and they tell them either things. They tell a very different story than they're going to tell you, but their big story is rely on us. We're gonna whatever's not right, we're gonna fix it because we know how to run the place. And that's and Moody's believes them and actually wrote this in their bond report. So I can't hide it from you. They believe this. The people on the other side believe that they run the place the right way. There's no doubt that they firmly believe that. We have had solid enrollment growth the last 2 years. It's been really very strong. This one doesn't get enough play, which is a diversified revenue. When we look at the pie chart for the revenue source, we're going to see a pie chart with not one slice of that pie dominating, a lot of different slices, which of course is not putting your eggs all in one basket, which is good overall. And the debt is manageable. In terms of the challenges, the reserves are not that high. They're not low, but they're certainly not high as we'll look at. This is a very complex place. I'm not bragging. It took 144 slides. I could have done another 50, 80 slides to really. There's so much. There's so much that goes on here from a financial basis at every. It's not just the different campuses. It's the interactions between them, the different state agencies that are all very complex. And the state itself is still not great. As we'll show you, New Jersey is not in the top half of states in support of public higher education in our country, which a state as rich as New Jersey in terms of their per capita income should be better. I think we could all agree on that. Definitely should be better. And Becky mentioned healthcare as such an important issue for your membership. And by the way, Becky, if I could chime in with one thing, you said something that's triggered my mind. You said that the vision is not. I don't even call it insurance. The copays for insurance in here and dental are so bad that it doesn't even deserve the name insurance. That's where I've used that line at the bargaining table before. It's really not a good place. If I could support what Becky said, and there is a lot of volatility in the sector, though the healthcare revenues and expenses at RBHS are doing very well. And the performance is thinner. We'll look at the operating performance, and it is thinner. So we'll start with just the balance sheet. Things are looking really good. Assets are up. Debt is up, but not nearly as much as assets. And some of this $4.7 billion of net assets, we're going to see how much are really true reserves. Not a large amount of it. A lot of it is spoken for, no doubt. Looking at the asset composition, you can see cash and investments over $3 billion, which is directly cited in the bond rating. The $3+ billion cash and investments is cited as a strength. And this came up a little earlier today, we've had a significant growth in capital assets and construction projects, which we're about to see in a minute. And they definitely like new buildings around here. Now, obviously, we hear the word or the phrase deferred maintenance. Oh my God, if we don't do deferred maintenance, the place is going to fall apart. They're doing a lot more than deferred maintenance. And so I have 2 pages here of projects that are mentioned. And I don't give them all. I didn't copy every word they wrote about all of them. And there's some other documents where they talk about the groundbreakings and things of that nature that were projects that were finished that didn't even make the list of upcoming projects, which is all this is. And they feel good about themselves. I think a university, there's nothing wrong with new buildings and taking over floors of like this first one here. And this is obviously a project that a lot of people believe in, which is great and going to do a lot of good things. But don't tell me you have no money when you're doing all of this. And some completions in 26, some in 27. We can see on the next page, some in 29. But over the next several years, we have a lot of different projects, and some of them are just like this one here. This next to last one is just plain maintenance, basically. They just have a list of things they're doing. So it's not like they're not doing maintenance. It's on their list of things that they even decided to put it on their list and say it's 42% complete. If it's so, I don't know what that even means, but there you go. So looking at the reserves, the restricted expendable reserves are reserves that are there, they're helpful, but they can only be used for a specific purpose. The purposes at Rutgers that they're mostly used for are to fund scholarships for middle and low income students and their families, to fund debt service, to make sure the principal and interest is paid, and for research and other new initiatives that they want to keep that come up that they definitely earmark that money for. And those are all good things. Those are all good things. The only thing about restricted expendable is you can't spend it on other things like salaries and things of that nature. But still, it's very good to have a lot of definitive needs covered, which is why Moody's and Standard and Poor's and Fitch's includes them in their reserve analysis. I use the same scale here for the reserves. You can see the unreserved portion is the dark green and the dark green. And, we get to just under $1 billion of unrestricted reserves, and which is that a good amount? I mean, it sounds like a lot of money. Well, here's putting it in context for you. And so Rutgers has an AA3 bond rating, which is there's AAA, AA1, AA2, AA3, and then A1. And the orange would be A, the green would be AA. So you guys are, it just so happens, and it's not a coincidence, of course. I didn't assign the bond rating. Moody's is. It's not a coincidence that the bond rating is very much between AA and A, closer to A. That's exactly what the reserves tell us. There's a solid amount of reserves, and that's why I use the word solid in describing the overall financial condition of Rutgers. Certainly not AAA. I just did a report for Indiana and ongoing work at U of M, Michigan, here in Ann Arbor, and they have AAA bond ratings. But I'm telling you, it's no different. It's the same things Brian was saying at the beginning about what the administration is going to say. They say it no matter what the bond rating is. It's the same story. Is the story things may be okay, but we have so many headwinds, we have so many potholes in front of us that, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. We love you, but we just can't. It's really no different anywhere. Obviously, every place is different, but the same general story that the administration has come up with is that. But I think the reserves, I think this is a good picture to give you a sense of where Rutgers is financially in solid condition, is the way I'll put it. In terms of the cash inflows, where the cash is coming from, you could see big increases to patient services over the last several years, even increases to tuition revenue, research and grants. We're going to talk about those in a minute. State appropriation is going up. It's obviously something that got mentioned, and we'll look at that closely later. Auxiliaries is housing, dining, student union, bookstore, athletics. And this is actually defined in the document later. The big drop in the red is because of the COVID year, but things are certainly picking up there. Federal and state financial aid, which is one of the potholes they claim is actually doing very well. And if you remember a couple of years ago, they said, when that COVID relief money goes away, when the state and federal COVID money, HERF money, Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund money goes away, the world's going to come to an end. Well, first of all, it was never that large in the context of Rutgers overall. It's gone away, and it's really not even talked about anymore. This is a very important slide in terms of again, solid financial condition. This tells me on an operational basis, every dollar they bring in cash versus every dollar paid for every employee, all the cash paid for salaries, benefits, all the cash paid for supplies, for mowing the lawn, all the cash paid for operational stuff. They bring in more than they spend. This is in thousands, so it's $75 million. It's about where it's been for the last 4 years now. We've got 4 years now of data on this. And it was much better in 21, 19, and 16, not as higher than it was in 17, 18, and 20. So overall, 25 has been a fairly decent year. We're going to show you that 26 is probably going to be a much better year. My prediction is this number will be somewhere up in this range here for 26, and we'll show you why when we get there. In terms of performance, the metric that Moody's and Standard & Poor's, and I've been doing this a long time, and they've looked at different things over the years. All three of these ratios have been in vogue. The one that's been in vogue, I'd say for about 2-3 years now, is this middle one. EBITDA, standing for earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization. That sounds fancy. It's basically cash flow. It's like this, but not, it keeps some of the benefits of accrual, which accrual is, we're going to count the revenue when we've earned it, even if the cash has not been received. We're going to count an expense when the expense is incurred, even if the cash is not paid right away. And they think EBITDA does a better job than pure cash flow. And so in looking at these metrics, the net income ratio includes all too many non-cash stuff. So when you take that out, these are what we got. These are the pictures of operational performance. Moody's used the word thin in their description of EBITDA, which is this is 8.4% in 2024. The AAA bond rating universities are all in the teens. I'd say low to mid teens is where a AAA bond rating, a AA bond rating, a AA1 or a AA2 would be 10, 12, somewhere in where my cursor is up here, if you could see it. You guys are at 8, higher than it's been the last 2 years, not as high as it was a couple of years ago. Again, like the reserves, solid, not great, but certainly no sign of, there's no negative, the red line is, the pink line has not been close to being negative over the last decade. We go back that far. And so you can't claim that the university is in any sort of financial trouble at all. But they do claim that. And the reason why they claim that, and this is what Brian was talking about. And so I took all the documentation that I've seen from Rutgers in the audit, in other publications that they put out, and so I came up with the 7 concerns and complaints of the administration about where things are going. And I think from a bargaining perspective, you're going to hear about these things. So the one thing I want you to get out of this presentation as much as anything is how can we address the concerns that they're going to bring up at the table about the potholes. They may say, okay, the first part of the presentation, things may be okay looking backwards, but it's looking forward that's a real problem. Troy, it's good to see you again. So let's look the first one. Grant revenue is on the hook. These are the numbers for it, and this is the data. Look at the federal grants. Nothing but increase. Now, this is through the end of 25, but certainly the first year of the current administration is in here. They specifically mentioned NIH and NSF grants, National Institute of Health and National Science Foundation grants, in their documentation. The administration has mentioned those 2 agencies whose grants may be on the hook, in trouble, not as prevalent as in the past. We are unable, unfortunately, to see what the NIH and NSF, from the documentation that they provide publicly, it's impossible to tell whether those are increasing. We do know the overall federal grants, and we know where they come from total. And this is really good news that they're doing nothing but going up. The state grants and the non-governmental and private grants are much smaller, but the total grant revenue is definitely higher. Now, in the 26 budget, and the 26 budget was created in July of 25. It was approved by the board in July. Your board of trustees is going to approve the 26 budget was approved in July of 25. The 27 budget is about to be approved likely in the next, I'm pretty sure there's a board of trustees meeting coming up this month. At this next board meeting, either they're going to have the meetings, the subcommittee in finance is going to have these meetings and talk about it and make a final decision, or put off, but a decision is coming soon on the board approving the budget. So we don't know what they're saying yet about 27. We're going to know pretty soon. When many of you are at the table, we're going to know. And one of the things I always pledge to all you guys, I'm not leaving. You guys know how to find me. If you say to me, the budget is out, could you look at the budget and tell me, like if you guys, if Patrick or Becky or anyone emails me, could you look at the budget and say, I certainly will do that. There's no meter running. There's no additional costs. There's none of that. I'm with you guys for the long term on this. And I definitely would like to, I'm anxious to see what that budget is going to say about especially this one issue right here. I'm very anxious to see what the 27 budget is going to say about grant income, which is a significant portion of their income. It is one of the largest income sources. So I'm not meaning to poo-poo it, but note in the 26 budget, they have a $3 million or 0.4% drop, which is very small. It's not clear whether they put grant income all in one. They just report this number in the overall budget. That's all they're reporting. And they do report the budget for the different units. So when looking at New Brunswick, and New Brunswick dominates the grants. They did have an increase in grants for New Brunswick from 25 to 26 that was budgeted. We're not going to know the actual numbers. These numbers are all actuals. This graph is all actual dollars. We're not going to know this number until the fall, until after as I know the way things work at Rutgers, some of you guys don't bargain. Some of the negotiations don't end that quickly. Some of you guys have bargaining that's gone on for quite a while. Is that a fair assessment to say? that some of the bargaining, some of the negotiations drag on for more than a couple of weeks. So, but certainly we'll know that in the fall and look forward to that. Okay, the next claim, sorry, is financial aid disruptions. This one really is a claim without merit at all. There's not much to equivocate about here. There's in the audit and in the budget, they put two in the audit, they put two categories. In the budget, they have only one. They combine federal and state into one. In the audit, they break it up into two. We did have declines in federal and student aid in the early part of this decade. Well, this was not, the current president was not the person in charge. Now, the state is a separate issue. The state did take away some grants, as you may remember, and that's under a, can I say this, small d Democratic governor? Am I allowed to say that out loud? He wasn't He's not the governor anymore. For obvious reasons, he can't. But he was not perfect with public higher ed. If I'm where I sit, maybe you guys have a different view of him. And he may have been a friend. Troy shaking his head, no. I don't think he was that helpful. When you look back on it, I don't think he definitely could have been much better in terms of his support for public higher education in your state. And the numbers bear that out. I don't mean to be personal about it, but that's just the truth. But the good news is that we have 2 straight years now of significant increases in both federal and state financial aid. And even better, in the 26 budget, when you combine these two, the way they're doing financial aid, and they include everything, they include internal aid as well and private sources, they have federal aid going from $258 million to $279 million, which is really very significant, an increase of 8.4%. So I don't think this is a claim without any merit at all. Okay, next is the demographic cliff. I've been hearing about this demographic cliff forever, that there's 10 high school students left in the state of New Jersey. And that's all there are. There's no one left to go to school ever again. The administrators, the presidents and CEO, that level of person, has been getting information from their sources that there's going to be a decline in the number of college age, 16 to 19, 20 to 24, however you want to look at it, age people over the next decade. This graph from the Federal Reserve in St. Louis goes back all the way to 1948 and goes through, as you can see here, 4/1/2026. So it goes through as recent as we have data. And we have generally seen a large increase in the number of college eligible students over decades, and certainly even over the last decade. So even if there is a decline, which is hard to know what the future is going to be, I'm just not seeing it. And so the projections are certainly not favorable towards their claim. And when you look at the number of first-year students, so this slide, and again, I'm going to try to understand the audience not having this in front of you is difficult. I broke this up: Newark, Camden, and RBHS, and then New Brunswick. This is all first-time undergraduates, which is what they were complaining about with the demographic cliff that was talked about by the president in this case. I think he made it in a speech, was that there aren't enough, it talked about first year 18, 19, 20-year-olds to go to college. That's what the complaint was specifically. Graduate students we could get to is a different story, but they were complaining specifically about first year undergraduate students in their documentation and in their speeches that they've given. And you could see, looking at the last 5 years, first of all, this light blue is the data from the Office of Institutional Research and Decision Support. They actually just put estimates here. They didn't put real numbers. You guys don't, come on, can't you just put just put real numbers? Just give us real numbers instead of estimates. But anyway, so I just did the outside years, 21 to 25, which the years we have data for. And the applications have soared tremendously. A lot of this is the cost of the application, the ease of application has gone up significantly over this time. What matters most is, are more kids coming or not? And this is what we see. In 2021, there were 9,009 new students in all of Rutgers, and in the last fiscal year, there were 10,801. That is a significant increase in first-year students. And we'll see, we look at the the graduation rates are actually very solid here for such a large public institution. They're very good. And at all the campuses, at New Brunswick, Newark, Camden, RBHS, everything is up in terms of first-year students. I don't think the demographic cliff is anything that is worth complaining about. International student volatility. Again, I didn't choose that word. That word was chosen by your president. Again, in they give a lot of speeches and stuff. They do that, and they have to put them. They put them online. They're not exciting reading. I'm not. You guys don't need to go and read them, but I found that word odd. It struck me when I looked at it. I didn't see the word decline. I saw volatility, which again is a different word. They're not the same words. But anyway, in general, there's been a slight decline from 22 to 23, but for the last 3 years, it's not a significant decline in international students. And when you look at the different campuses, you don't see over the last 3 years much change in international enrollment. Slight increase in Camden, where international students are the smallest percentage. And looking at the last, looking at just this year and here, from fiscal 24 to fiscal 25, we see a 5% increase in international enrollment. So I think we're good with international enrollment. Inflation and wage pressure. So the 3.8% is for 2025. And I'm getting this inflation number. That's the consumer price index for all urban consumers for this area. And someone noted earlier today that the 3.8 rate is higher. It is in the New York area, but we only have a partial year. We don't have the full year yet, and it hasn't been seasonally adjusted. But it is 4 and change in the current year, though we have again, we haven't seasonally adjusted it, and we haven't, which it does get, they do that to the end, and we don't have a full year of data. But still, the green bar is the payments to all employees, not just including the unaligned, not aligned, I'm sorry, and all the bargaining unit members. And other than this first year when things were very different, it's been the case that in general, the wage increases have not been all that different from inflation. And you guys are able to do this because you have unions. That's why, because you guys stay together, you bargain together, you come out strong, and this is why you get good contracts. But I don't see, inflation is a tad higher this early year. It is 3.8 nationally. It was 3.8 for this region at the end of last year. It was 3.3 nationally. This is higher than it was earlier. We go back in time where we had, the orange being in the 2% range from the early part of the last decade, and even lower than that some years before that. But still, it's not ridiculously high. And the wage pressure, I think what we've been asking for has been reasonable, as Brian said earlier, and I just don't see this as an issue. But I'll certainly keep you up on the inflation data as the inflation data comes out. We're going to have a report come out. We should have a report come out, I think, next Friday, not this Friday. I think next Friday we should have a report come out to get May's inflation. And I think that should be something, again, you just ask me and I'll let you know what the inflation was nationally, what it was in your region, what it was food, energy, and energy is just driving the whole thing. I'm not going to say why. I'm just going to say it is. I'm not going to say why. I'm not going to get into that. But the energy costs are very high in driving inflation. I just want to make a note on the cash paid to employees. And I have it here. This is for everybody that works at Rutgers. And the green is the cash actually paid to employees for salaries and benefits. The orange is what they claim is compensation expense in the audit, and the purple is what they claim compensation is in the budget. It just demonstrates that they overstate their problem. When they talk about structural deficits, they're talking about the purple bar as being total compensation, when the actual cash they pay out is significantly different. And you get a very different answer. $700 million less in cash paid out than in what they're putting in the budget. They are accruing benefits costs that are not all paid in cash. That's the bottom line. And they're making things look a lot worse than they really are. In terms of, to continue the complaints, not enough in-state students, not enough out-of-state students, too many in-state because they charge 2.39 more for an out-of-state student. The percentage of students from Jersey, and that's what we used to say back in the day, is actually the lowest it's been in the last decade, in this last year. which is good news. And this is not overall students. This is based on the residency of first year students as they identify themselves to the federal government when they Rutgers identified them to the federal government. You can see it's gone down significantly, and it's just going back here on every campus: Camden, New Brunswick, Newark, and all of Rutgers. We have declines in the number of students who are from Jersey and more out of state where they charge more tuition. The last thing, not enough grad students. And when you look at 22 to 26 or the 5 year period, grad and professional students do look like they're having a decline. But you look at this last sub period of the last 2 years, we get a different story. The decline again was in 22 and 23. I think a lot led by the decline in international. You have a lot of international graduate students. Those two things combined. There's a lot of Venn diagram overlapping there. And so looking at the different campuses, we see Camden has a slight decline in grad students, but all the others have increases in both grad and professional students. There are some transparency issues. If you want to have some fun, go to some of these links. You'll see nothing at them. You'll see how behind Rutgers is in terms of what they put online, in terms of the availability and the amount of years they put on stuff. They're not very good at telling us what's going on with things. National security secrets, I guess. This is the revenue distribution I talked about earlier. Not putting their eggs in one basket. It's nice to have a pie chart with so many different slices: patient services, tuition, grants, all almost the same, and really healthy financially to not put all your eggs in one basket. That's what's going on there. Total revenues are going up with patient services included, without patient services included. Both sides of the university are doing well, and this is kind of what we looked at before. Someone asked earlier about the discount rate. This is the discount rate on off the sticker price and tuition. And this discount's also given for housing and dining on the 3 campuses. And they changed the way they did the accounting in this last year. Let me get this out of your way for you. So you could see it looked like the discount rate went up a lot, but they dropped it on housing and dining. So the combined discount rate went up about 2 points. And this discount rate is not much higher than your peer institutions, the Big Ten peers. In terms of, is one of the campuses getting the short end? Using this is 2020, sorry. This is 2024 appropriation. New Brunswick got 83% of the appropriation, but it's only 75% of the enrollment, but it is 93% of the grants and it is 85% of the salaries paid. In the federal, in the way this is done to the Department of Education, the way Rutgers does not send data for RBHS separately from New Brunswick, the main part of the University of New Brunswick. They send it all together. So I didn't put them together. Rutgers does that when they send it to the federal government, but it looks like the allocations are somewhat fair. In terms, I talked about, this is what I talked about with the lobbying early. When they did last year's budget, they had a 17 or almost $100 million decline to the state appropriation, a 70% decline. And we came out with these articles: final state budget restores funding to Rutgers. State budget bill restores funding to Rutgers. These articles almost a year ago. I don't know what the next, we're going to know in a couple of weeks what this document, what this table is going to look like for 27. And again, I'm willing to help and work with, if Brian or Becky or Patrick or anyone wants to send me a message and the budget is out, this won't take long at all. The good news in this budget for 26, the current year we're in now, they're forecasting a 6.7% or a $373 million increase in revenues, while they only forecasted a $284 million or 5% increase in expenses, which is good news. I said earlier, New Jersey is not great in terms of public higher ed, 29th out of 50 a state. In terms of per capita income, when you use gross income, it's even worse because New Jersey is a richer state than most. So well below the national average when it comes to public higher ed. Sorry to hear that. Here's the enrollment story on the different campuses. This is the best news with enrollment that you could use at the table. After 1, 2, 3, 4 straight years of enrollment declines, 2 straight years of enrollment increases, bigger than we've seen in the last decade. And just to give you a sense, look, 71,477 students. The bigger this number is, it's really hard to get even a 1% increase in enrollment. These are incredibly impressive increases in enrollment over that period of time. And just looking at 25 to 26, all 4 units here have increases in enrollment in the year that we're in now, which is really impressive to see. So very excited about that. I think that's great news for you guys at the table. The longer term picture going back to 16 is not as strong. But looking at the last couple of years, a very strong story. And the reason why, we had all these years of declines built in, which is why, and these didn't do as well over that time period. New Brunswick has done very well the entire time. In terms of tuition and fee price, 5% increase is what we're dealing with this year. The current year we're in now, 5% per year. We're going to know, I think within 2 weeks, what this number is going to be for 26, 27. I think that's very instructive for your bargaining, in my estimation. This is the tuition revenue. So tuition revenue is based a lot on price and enrollment. We don't know the tuition revenue number for 26 yet, regardless of what their budget may say. We do know that we have a large increase in price and a strong increase in enrollment. We should have another green bar. I think it may even be better than this one. I think maybe up here for next year, for the year we're in now. All I'm doing here, I just did this for my own edification more than anything. I looked at every graduate program you guys have, the tuition and fee structure for every graduate program on all 3 campuses. It gave me a sense, not that I didn't know this already. Forget, the numbers, obviously, I wanted to make sure the numbers were right, and that's fine. To me, what's most important, what I took out of this, and hopefully you will as well, is the incredible breadth, BREADTH, of programs that Rutgers has. And this is just on the graduate side. Here's Camden, and here's Newark. It's really amazing when you think about it. The programs that are involved at Rutgers. It's really an amazing place. And the reason why auxiliaries lose money is athletics, which we'll get to in just a couple of minutes. Patient care doing very well, thank you. Revenue's better than expenses and rising, which is good news. In terms of the expenses, these are what's called functional expense categories. In terms of the people who are at this presentation, none of you are going to be in here. These are only the non-aligned people can be in here. And I don't think, I think Patrick made clear to me earlier today and yesterday that we're not going to have any unaligned people at this session. People who are not part of bargaining units are not here. And none of you are in this category. So that's the category we look to compare to. The percentage distribution, you can see the percent to instruction generally going down, which is not always favorable, but what they call general administration is kind of flattish. And I did it for all the campuses. I'm not going to go over the details, obviously, given the time frame, but all this is here. The natural expenses there's a different way of coming to the total expenses than the functional. These are the functional expenses, and these are the natural expenses. Just different ways of breaking up the total expenses. And this is using IPEDS, the federal government, using their categorizations. And there's the admin category. You can see the differences between New Brunswick and the other campuses is research. You could see the research being a much more significant part at New Brunswick, less so at Newark and Camden. And this is the institutional support category. This is overall, and we'll compare this to the peers in a second. Promise we're going to get there. In terms of admin spending, so I looked at the salary only, just looking at these expenses, these expense categories. This is the total expense. But within these expenses, IPEDS reports salary only, no benefits, just salary. The reason why that's advantageous, they can always play with benefits, as we've seen. Salary, they can't play with. That's W-2. They take the salaries from your W-2s and they add them up, and that's it. And that's what this is. So over the last 8 years or so, instructional salaries up 20%, all the other staff up 26%, the main admin category up 42%. So they've gone up almost twice as much as everyone else who works at Rutgers. And I think the graph speaks for itself. In terms of the employees, looking at faculty by tenure status and part-time faculty, tenured is the green, tenure track, non-tenure track, and there's, I think, 3 different unions representing the different groups that are on this graph, and I understand that. And you can see part-time being such a significant component. Brian said that, we're the ones that do the core work at Rutgers. Part-time faculty are doing a lot of the work at Rutgers as well. And I'll admit, and I used to be one myself many, many years ago. So for several years, I did it when I was in Chicago. I got treated like crap, if that means anything to you. We didn't have a union then. They're still trying to get recognized there. We've been fighting that fight for over a decade now. So I certainly know this life. And yeah, I could just say, oh God, it was rough. It was very difficult. We didn't get no respect, no office, no anything. It was just terrible the way they treated us there. And I'm not, I think we didn't have a union, and the faculty, the part-time faculty here are much better off because you have a union. It's that simple. You don't have that voice when you're a part-time faculty member and you don't have a union behind you. You guys know what that looks like. You guys may not know what that looks like. It's not pretty. That's all I can tell you. It's not pretty. And so, but look how important part-time faculty are to what goes on at Rutgers. So
Sorry, Rhonda asked for the patient care slide again in chat.
the patient care slide. He wanted, I know, I'm getting there. This. The way they report revenues on the financial statements. They break up revenues. They break up the patient care revenues into what they call house staff, and then the other part of patient care. I have that in my own documentation, and they combine it into one called patient care, and they have an expense category in the audit called patient care expenses. This is not in the federal government's data. This is in the audited financial statements. That's where this is coming from. And as you can see, we've had tremendous growth on both the revenue and expense side, but certainly surpluses every year, no matter what I'm glad you brought this up. I've done a lot of work with a lot of unions, a lot of places that have, big, Stanford, Duke on the private sector side, UW on the public sector side. They complain about Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement rates. And I did not hear that complaint all that often from your administration. That was not in when I would have listed it in I would have listed it as one of the 7 deadly sins. If I had seen it, I would have put it there. But they didn't put it there. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to bring it up at the table, but they have not publicly said much or anything about healthcare, about Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement rates, which they have said at almost every other university I work with that has significant operations in that respect. So sorry about that. So these are the long-term percentage changes in part-time faculty over time. Again, this group is just, after my own heart, because having been there for several years, I always feel an affinity with this group of people. And you can see certainly recently, just, the changes, it changes so much, the fluctuation, the security issues are certainly always there. So just want you guys to have this. All right, faculty salaries, generally not bad versus inflation. Why? Because you have unions. That's why. You guys do well versus inflation. And we've had a lot of inflation we've definitely had a lot of inflation during this time period, but overall we've done okay. So because we have unions. Now, in terms of the employee classifications that are given to the federal government, these classifications are standard. They're standard in these definitions used by the Department of Education. And you could see what happened in the reporting in New Brunswick and the other places as well. In 23, they just jacked up who counts as management. And I'm hoping, I don't know for sure that some of URA-AFT is not part of this category anymore. I would like to know why they did this and who they included here. So it's hard to compare this number to what came before it because of this drastic change. And the same change happened at Newark, the same change happened at Camden, and it happened and then some on the medical side. I mean, look at that. They didn't just hire 318 new managers. They just reclassified people from this category to that category. And I'm not sure why. I'd like to know why. I don't know how much it matters. I do know. So this, and I apologize, before I did not have HPAE here. I tried to get, from this website, and I did find it. They said to me, oh, it's on there. I found it I should have found it earlier. It's my mistake for not finding it earlier. But these are, I think everything I think I may have missed one again. I'm not sure. But again, this is mostly for my edification, just to see what's going on. And plus, I think for you guys, just if you could see, obviously there's a lot of, all these scales have all these grades in between. Some of them have midpoints in there, and some have not just midpoints. HPAE has 20 steps of different salary in there, and many have that as well. So just gives you a sense of where do I fit in? Because if I were in the audience, I would want to know where I fit in. That's just me. Everyone wants to know where we fit in. It's just human nature. And so, where do you fit into this versus where you fit in to this, which is the employment categories used by the federal government for all of Rutgers. You can see management and management, just to show you what happened before they flipped at New Brunswick, the average manager was making 230. Now the average manager went down to 169 because they added all these people who were lesser paid. Doesn't mean they should have done it. Doesn't mean they did anything evil or wrong. You don't see startling changes like this very often. So it begs the question, what'd you do and why'd you do it? And I can work with anyone who wants to talk to them about it so we can figure out what happened. Because it does get into, can we describe management bloat? Having said that, I still think on this slide right here, looking at the management category, even for the sub period, just for the last 3 years, management is up more than all the other staff employees, which is all of you. I think all of you, or most of you, full-time faculty, and then enrollment going up like that. But I do want to be able to make those arguments. Okay, in terms of athletics, $78 million deficit in 25, the biggest ever, 70 million the year before. These are the deficits going back. They went into the Big Ten right around here. It's gotten worse, and it's going to continue to get worse. Why is it going to continue to get worse? Look at the expenses since they got into the Big Ten. They're going up at an unbelievable rate every year. Why? The money is coming in, the money is going out. Rutgers feels a need to keep up with who they're competing with. And so you could just tell by the slope of the graph, the expenses are going up a lot faster than revenues. I think you guys could see this graph on your devices or if you're looking on a bigger screen. You could definitely see the slope of the increase in athletic revenues is not quite what it is with expenses. And the deficit itself, you can see that there's a $78 million. It basically is covered. It's covered in 3 ways. 3 ways they cover the deficit. One, they write direct checks, or so they claim. I don't quite know how they do that. 2, they take the student fee. They take, you can see 12 million, 13 million, 14 million, 15, almost $16 million student fee money goes to athletics, whether the students go to the games or not, whether they like sports or not, whether they watch sports or not. It's based on credit hour. And that goes up every year. And then in their budget, they build in a huge deficit every year. They admit it. They admit this. You usually don't see that, but they admit that the revenues in athletics aren't going to equal the expenses. And that's how you get the $78 million. It's really unbelievable when you look at it. And athletic expenses over the last 3 years gone up 40%. All the other expenses at RU going up less than 18%. That needs to be addressed. I don't think it's anything that's a direct win at the table, but it really is something you should bring up. You don't, we could talk about how to use this data at the table, but anyway, this graph tells a nice story because it shows the dollar changes. Yes, they will argue the following. They're going to make 2 arguments. Look at our revenues in athletics. They keep going up. Yes, they are going up, but look at the expenses. They're going up a lot more. Look at over the 3-year period, revenues up $30 million. Most of it from TV money associated with football. That's where some of it basketball, most of it is football. At the same time, their expenses went up $55 million over 3 years. Let me ask you this. At the table, we always did this, and I've always done this, just to figure out how far apart we were. Brian, you said you're doing compensation in the next coming week, and I'm sure many of the other units are as well. You get to some point where either the 2 sides agree upon or internally, how far apart are we? I can promise you this, it's probably not this far apart. You're not going to be this far apart at the table with your units. And it's unbelievable that they keep doing this. And I love sports. As you guys know, there's no one who loves sports like me. But this this is just untenable, but it keeps happening. And I don't know of a way out. They're not getting out of the Big Ten, and I don't think you should. That's just not happening. They're not getting out. But remember, those of you who are around, I was on your campus, and I wasn't the one saying this. You people in the audience were saying, and I remember that dingy hall that we did the presentation in, there were some people yelling at the back saying, we should not do this. There was anger from your membership about going into the Big Ten, and they proved to be right. We shouldn't have done this. They shouldn't have done it. You can't undo it though. At this point, I don't see how you do it. And the subsidy from the student fees and the direct payments, you can see the only school that's worse than you guys is UCLA. And this is UCLA pre-admission to the Big Ten. We don't have any data from the Knight Commission before 24. Look who you're competing with. You're competing with schools that don't have to subsidize anything. Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, Michigan, Nebraska, they're self-supporting in athletics. Rutgers, not so much. Never going to be. And it gets worse. The coaches' compensation over the last 4 years, from 30 million to 47 million. It's not that people are being paid unlike market. As I'll show you, I'll get to it. I have the coaches' salaries in the Big Ten. They're paying what they have to pay. And Greg, your coach is toward the bottom of the Big Ten at $6.5 million. Ticket sales, there's football doing, oh, look at football taking in all the money. Yeah. Let's look at football's revenues. 9 million in ticket sales. They got some contributions. They got some conference money. 25 million in football revenue. Sounds good. Except that they have $64 million in expenses. That's not good. I'm sorry to yell, but come on now. 39 million, that's in 24, 25, $48 million deficit just in football. They will argue the following, that being in the most prestigious athletic conference in the country increases donations to the university in general, increases applications and admissions. That's what they will argue. I'm sure some of you have different opinions. It's the front porch, it's the window to the university. That's not who Rutgers is. I grew up in Long Island. That's not who Rutgers is. Rutgers, you know who Rutgers is? I'll tell you who. To me, what Rutgers is, more than anything, sorry to go so slow here. Rutgers is, I'm getting there. Where am I? I missed it. Is all those programs. I'm not going to miss it this time. There we go. This is Rutgers. This is who Rutgers is. All these academic and other programs. This is who Rutgers is in Camden. This is who Rutgers is in Newark. This is who Rutgers is. And not a football team. And I'm sorry to bring this up, but I'm going to bring it up anyway because it's the facts. And I'm not meaning to make fun of anybody or put anybody down, but this is what's happened at Rutgers. Look at your record in football over the last 4 years in conference: 1-8, 3-6, 4-5, 2-7. That's not a surprise. Those teams are look who you're competing with. You shouldn't be competing with them. Stay in the Big East. You should have stayed there. Basketball, women's basketball, awful record, and we'll show you why in a second. In terms of the big revenues, you can't compete. The 4 big revenues are conference money, ticket money, donor contributions. You guys are last in the conference in ticket sales. Last in donor contributions to athletics. Next, third from last in corporate sponsorship. You add these revenues to media rights are in the middle of the pack because you're in the Big Ten, but the media rights are not covering the deficiency in these major revenues that puts you just ahead of UCLA. And I predict after UCLA has entered the Big Ten, they will be ahead of you. You will be last in the conference in revenue. You can't exist this way. And the athletic, it's not good. In terms of the money, look at women's basketball to men's basketball. More than twice as much money is spent on men's basketball than women's basketball in terms of dollars. And the women's coaches making much less than the men's coaches because you're in the Big Ten. It's really unbelievable. Here's coaches' salaries. By the way, the guy at Indiana is now making $13.2 million. This is last year's salary. He's now making $13 million a year. So, all right, last thing, peers. There's a couple, just not too many things I want to show you here. The things I want to show you here, in terms of salaries, faculty salaries are kind of middle of the pack, maybe a little higher. The Newark, and I want to talk about the Newark and Camden peer groups that were chosen by the administration. For Rutgers Newark, they chose this peer group and only 8 other peers, and your faculty salaries are by far the highest, 30-40% higher than everyone else on this list. Now, I have 2 other categories here that I added. Union, yes or no? You guys unionized, UIC is unionized. All the others are not unionized. A little on the reddish, southernish part of things. And I'm not against red or south. We lived in Texas for 7 years, not against the red or the south. But they're going to pay less. They're just going to pay less there. They don't have unions. And they're just not going to pay as much. Cost of living is a lot lower. In terms of, you guys are art, there's only one other R2 besides you guys are all R1. So it's not the research element. I think it's this element and the geography. With Camden, there's 17 other peers. Again, you're first in full professor salary, fourth in associate, fifth in assistant, toward the top in instructor, and you add all the ranks together, you're first. In terms of research, Camden is R2, which is in the middle, maybe toward the top of this group. The none category means they're not even R3. They have R1, R2, R3, and then nothing, the way Carnegie does it. And you can see where that is. And I know for a fact that these peer groups for Camden and Newark were chosen by the administration, likely without any input from you guys. And I think it's something you should consider at the table, especially for these peer groups. For the faculty at Newark and at Camden, I think you should have some say as to who your peers are. And the last slide is the presidential salaries. The president of the universities of the Big Ten. And congratulations, you guys are fifth in the Big Ten this is base salary. And Penn State was first and Purdue was last. So there you go. All right. A couple minutes over, but not too many. I'm done. Ready for questions.